Hello and welcome on back to Election Time News. Today is Tuesday, July 8th, 2025, and we're going to be going over the House of Representatives elections, which is going to be based off of the impacts of the big beautiful bill, H.R.1, which is what I'm going to be calling it just to make it easy and for general clarification. And so this is obviously part of Election Time News. America will finally on the we will be getting to the Tasmanian state elections very soon, as it is happening. But I'm going on a trip in the meantime over the next week, so I will not be making any videos. However, once I come back a week from today, I will likely have a video out on the 16th, and I will absolutely have one out on the morning of the 18th with information and prediction on this for the day before. Election Time News, your one stop for all things elections and politics, from summations to power views and news. Subscribe below for more content like this about American, Canadian, and Australian elections. Also, make sure to follow the Substack, Threads, Instagram, and X. Remember, there's never a dull moment in politics. And if you do hear any thunder, it is storming right now. So, in the House elections in 2026, we have a very, very narrow majority, 219 to 217. We recently had a retirement in the one district in Tennessee here that is now showing up as vacant, and the other absences in these races are actually from deaths in the Democratic Party. This is due to a retirement. So we did have two special elections in Florida not that long ago. Both of them were filled back in with Republicans, so there was no change, but they were relatively close compared to how things might have expected to go. So, first off, it passed, even though a lot of people did oppose it. That is plus 9. That is plus 21 oppose, and then we also have that almost half of them say that it will hurt their family. So that's a potential concern considering that they passed it. And looking at the 2024 map, you can see that it was R plus 1.2.8 in the popular vote. But now 2026 is looking like a much more favorable blue year. It tends to be that way. And right now we're looking at a congressional vote of 2.3. If you look at 2018 at this point in time, it was a bit more. So it looks like it might be a bit less Democratic than 2018, but not by much, which means that we could be looking at somewhere near an 8-point margin for Democrats, probably be closer to about 7. So what does that look like? So here's going to be our map. Looking at other statistics, though, it is also looking a bit more like there's definitely discontent. I mean, there always is. We saw the exact same thing, except a bit less discontent in general with the Biden campaign and administration, but not quite as far. President Trump is sitting at a negative 3.2 approval rating. He's been negative since the second week of March. Going into the third week, he finally hit negative. He actually started off with a positive 6 in the beginning of his term, and then, as expected, there was the dip. But then he actually had recovered since the very end of April and has been hovering around a 5, a 3 point disapproval. He's actually on the lower end right now. It even was at 5.1 in the end of June. And you can see now he's also doing a good bit better now than he did in his first term. At this point, he was basically, an almost minus 20. So he's doing a bit better with his approval rating. That may be contributing to a less red wave area here. Direction of country is at almost minus 11 now, but it has definitely been worse at multiple points. It tends to get really, really bad right around the midterms, interestingly enough. Right here near 2018 actually dipped, but going into 2022 it went up. That actually was probably Roe v. Wade right at election seasons, right before, and then it always collapses when a president switches out, and then it comes right back up, typically in about August. So we might end up seeing another spike come up here in a bit. We'll have to see how large that is, and that's really going to be able to tell us what we might be looking at in the future. And then also the congressional job approval continually very, very low. It has not been positive once. The closest it was was at about minus 16 in March of 2009. And it's actually not that bad right now. It's at minus 33, point 0.8. Harvard Harris actually only had minus 15 for the overall spread there. That's actually pretty interesting. But we do have the Gallup poll minus 39, minus 40 here. So the Harris one is bringing it up a lot. These ones are much closer to minus 40. So but that one's a very large sample size. So that's going to help bring it up. So there's not a lot of content here, but I mean, there never really is with Congress. If you look right around the 2022 midterms, it was, minus 50. So content with Congress is always non-existent, but we're looking now at the map. This is a more general map based off of margins, but also overall performance for the district and a few districts that might have flipped a bit in the past, especially looking at 2018, which is the closest that we can get to something right now. For example, Arkansas is second, Oklahoma right there, Utah's fourth. Those are selected here. They're not as far. Now, Oklahoma redrew its district so that there wasn't as much of a chance that it would flip like it did there. It has a bit more of the outside area, so it is likely to not flip in this cycle. Same somewhat sort of thing with Utah. It's a bit less centralized around that area, so it is less likely to flip as well. But just because of those that did happen, you kind of need to have a bit of a lower certainty here. Same thing with quite a few districts here. Safe is generally like 20 or more points victory, and then anything from 10 to 20 or so is likely. And then anything below that I did not put down because we're going to have to go through district by district and look at what happens. So we're going to start, and I think what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to start going down the coast item by item. So starting up here in Maine, we have Jared Golden's district. He is a relatively popular candidate. He won election first in 2018. He managed to win by 6 in 2020 and then 6 again in 2022. He narrowly held on in 2024 by his lowest margin yet, but he did actually, interestingly, yeah, he actually ran against the person that he originally beat out of the seat in 2022. But in 2024, he narrowly held on by just over half a percentage point, but he's doing relatively well. I haven't actually checked any polls on this yet, so let me see if I can get any specific. I'd be surprised if there are any. Yeah, just the general congressional. There's no real actual head-to-head candidates because there's just so much uncertainty at this point in time. But he has said that he is in fact going to run for re-election. He's a relatively strong candidate, so unless there's a very strong one, I say that he is relatively favored to win this one, which we're going to be doing a 4 scale here. Safe, likely, lean with a toss-up because we're doing chances here. So this is probably going to be a 65 to 80% chance of his victory here. He's pretty popular. He managed to hold on in 2024. So since he did that, I see little to no chance that he's going to be losing in a more Democratic favorable environment. On to New Hampshire. Chris Pappas has retired. He is going to be running for the Senate in New Hampshire. Okay. And so as he says here, he's announced his candidacy to run, which after Jeanne Shaheen decided to not run. So Chris Pappas won by 8.1%. That's a relatively strong amount. We don't know any true candidates right now, but generally it is blue on the federal level. It's almost the exact opposite of North Carolina. Is generally red on the state level, but on the federal level it's a bit bluer. They tend to vote in Democrats, so that's going to be a slight favorability there. Maggie Goodlander is, as of right now, likely running for re-election, which means that she is going to be favored in the second district. She won by 6 in 2024. And that was the less of the two, but both of them won on average by 7.05, so there's not really that much of an underperformance here. So that is, in fact, going to be a relatively strong performance likely to be there. In Massachusetts, the only reason that this is likely is because that was a 10.5 point margin. That's really not that close. Going into Connecticut, this was likely to be a competitive seat in 2024. And then, even though Republicans won the popular vote by 2.8 or 1.8, um, we still ended up having Hayes win re-election by almost 7. So I think this one's actually not going to be that competitive. That's a relatively safe seat. Honestly, that's not going to end up being that big of a concern for the Democrats. They're going to be able to hold on to that seat. There's a lot more ones that they could be looking into flipping over the entire map, and they're not going to have to worry about holding on to that seat that strongly. Going from the north and south in New York, starting off with the 22nd District, Mannion. This is a redrawn districts, unfortunately, gerrymandered to be more favorable towards the Democrats after 2022. So they actually had a relatively even congressional vote, and then now it's heavily Democratic favored. But we do have Mannion's seat by almost 9. That's going to be a relatively strong chance of re-election. That's going to be on the higher end, closer to 80. Riley by 2.2 is going to be slightly favored. You do have the incumbency factor in there as well. Mike Lawler's a very popular candidate there. He's won continually. He flipped the seat in 2022 in the first place. They tried to draw the district slightly. It didn't really look like they touched that one that much, but he managed to win then by 6.3, which means that he actually did better than expected. Obviously, then he has the incumbency, but he has decided to not run so far for the governorship. He'd absolutely make that competitive against Kathy Hochul, but as of right now, that's not necessarily going to be that close of a race. So then we get into Lota here. That's basically safe. That was only a 10-point race, though, barely over, but that's not going to be that competitive. That is definitely going to be a sleeper flip, though, if there's anything there. It is going to be the first district, because there's also a lot of relatively rich people, and that's one of the 3 main groups that moved towards Kamala Harris from Joe Biden in 2024, was people who made over $400,000 a year. So this is going to have some interesting left trending regions here. If you look at the district here, it was by 11 in 2022, when Democrats won the popular vote by quite a bit, and then it actually got a lot closer in 2024. So that's definitely going to be something interesting to look at. Is going to be the first district in New York. These two recently flipped, and they also flipped in 2024, so they definitely have the benefit here of flipping it in a red wave year. They are more likely to be able to hold on to them unless there's very strong candidates who end up challenging them. Going down into New Jersey, the 9th district. This was a very rough district for Democrats. This is going to be the main section where they're going to be losing support. There's going to be less minority support. Perot only won by under 5, after Pascrell won by 11.4 in 2022. So that's definitely gonna. Why is it not showing up? Whatever. Um, that's definitely going to be a concern for the Democrats here. This is going to be still a Democratic incumbency. There's likely to be a much larger blue presence across the board. A lot of Democrats sat out in this area, in the entire New York City area in 2024. So that's definitely going to be an interesting one to watch, though. Mikey Sherrill's seat, she obviously is running for governor, so that's going to be another open seat. So that's going to only be likely, and she also won by under 15. Keene's seat, this is definitely one that Democrats are going to be going for, even more so than in 2024. He did vote for the bill. I bet that it's also New Jersey is going to be a bit of southern New York City, definitely going to be a bit more of that oppose crowd there. So they're definitely going to be attacking him for that. Depending on their messaging campaign, they could definitely end up actually taking him out there. But as of right now, he definitely does have the incumbency. He won by 5.4. But again, if the national environment's already 7 points to the left, then that already means that he's going to be losing by 2. So that is definitely going to be of some concern. And but he did manage to win in the first place when the Democrats won by 10 in New Jersey. So that is, and then they only won by 7, and he ended up winning by 5. So I think that's a slight overperformance there. Maybe by a point, a tenth of a percent or two. Not going to be that by that much, but if they end up winning by anything close to how they did in 2018, where it was by 20, he's going to lose the seat. Going down to the third district, Conway by 6. This is basically a safe district. It was, only 8.6. It's under 10, so I kind of had to go over that just to be safe. So moving on to Pennsylvania, a huge state here. The only really interesting thing is going to be the House races this cycle, interestingly enough, because the governor's race, Shapiro is likely to win re-election there. He's a very popular candidate. He's actually the most likely to win re-election out of the 3 states here, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, even though it went the most to Trump in 2024. But especially in Michigan. Michigan's the most contested this cycle. But start things off here. Brian Fitzpatrick, he actually voted against H.R.1, so he might be able to keep his seat, but he's been holding on to it for a long time. He actually had it from long before they actually fixed the districts. They used to be it was a very blue district and actually was a Democrat there, but in 2010, in a large red wave year, that's when he took his seat. And he's been able to hold on to it ever since, even after they redrew the map a bit more fairly. And he was able to hold on. Interestingly, Kelly was only by 4.3. And that is another candidate that is going to be running for re-election here, but won re-election recently by 27. So anyway, Fitzpatrick has been there for a long time. He's relatively well liked there, so I would not expect him to lose anytime soon. Now on the other hand, we have these 3. All of them went by 1.6 or less. Wild and Cartwright. In this case, I actually do think that a rematch would actually be best. Because they already have that name recognition. They are already known in the district. And it's very unlikely that the Republicans will win the popular vote by 2 points in Pennsylvania again. So, and also Perry, this is a left trending district as well. Cumberland County is one of the few counties that moved to the left in the entire Northeast, and that is a main chunk of the 10th district. It also encompasses Harrisburg, so this is a potential flip opportunity. 1.3 points. I believe that this was actually one that moved. Yeah, it moved 6.5 points to the left. When the nation as a whole went very far towards the right. So this one, actually, the Democrats have the advantage in the district with Perry there. He's been a long-term incumbent. Wrong button. A long-term incumbent there. But then we also have these 2. I believe that these are both. I think I can. No, there's no. I don't want. I can't click edit. That's dumb. I used to be able to click edit, and then I just do by popular vote margin, because it does show that it should show the shift of the. It's interesting. It should show the shift in the popular vote here, but it's going to be able to show in comparison to the nation. But I think this is slightly right trending, and this one's slightly left trending in respect to the nation as a whole. But these are basically perfect toss-ups because we have a slightly blue environment here. It depends on the candidates and all of that, but it'll also be part of this starboard here along the east coast of these more somewhat similar electorates. Then we move in towards the outer Pittsburgh area, Deluzio by 7.8. I don't expect this to go red. It was just under 10. Then we move down to the state of Maryland, where we have the 6th district. This was expected to be somewhat competitive, but then it kind of got carried away. And so now we end up with a very strong candidate here, redistricted to be a bit less favorable towards the Democrats, yet now you still end up with relatively strong performance, winning by 6.3 after winning by 9.6 in 2022. There was actually a different candidate, so it was an open seat and still did relatively well. That's going to be another likely rating there on the map. Going into Virginia, here we have 3 competitive races. The first one's going to be the one around the Virginia Beach area. This one did go blue. It was a bit different. It had the outer Norfolk, or not Norfolk, Norfolk's up here. Newport News and other areas, cities down here around the Virginia's 3rd district. It went blue in 2018, stayed blue in 2020, got redrawn, was a bit more red in these areas for 2022, and Kiggins flipped it, but now went from 3.4 to 3.8. The popular vote, interestingly, also didn't really move either. So that is in the state of Virginia. So for that reason, she appears to be doing relatively well. I do think that she is narrowly going to be able to hold on to this. If we end up getting any polls, then definitely it's going to be a bit more interesting than that. And there's going to be a no toss-up map. I'm going to give it to one party or the other. Vindman, Supermanium did pass away, I believe, at this point. So he, or maybe it was the other one, I don't remember. One of the two. I believe it was up there, right? And check the map. Yes, it was in fact. Um, no, it was the safe blue district up here. Okay. That makes a bit more sense. I didn't see. Yeah, Connolly. Connolly. I knew about that. Connolly. Yes, Connolly passed away. He was the chair of the one committee, and there was a whole thing. Anyway, so Suriname 4.6. Wexton won by 4.5. Little to no change. But that's going to be most likely an incumbency advantage. There's very little chance he's actually going to have much of an issue to win re-election here. Vindman, almost the exact same thing, except that was the exact same thing. Spanberger, who's now running for governor, didn't have the incumbency advantage, but likely to win re-election this time. Then we go down to North Carolina. Hold for the Democrats here. Went from a relatively more Democratic favorable map here to this map, which is very unfair towards the Democrats. There's a lot of these sorts of things around the country, like Illinois, which is very unfavorable towards the Republicans. I mean, if you want to see just how generally unfavorable it is, just look at the popular vote map versus the vote map. But I mean, in some cases, there's only so much you can do. So you end up looking down at we were at North Carolina at this point. You end up with Davis by 1.7. It's probably gonna be a more competitive race. Democrats are definitely gonna be looking here again because of the Senate race, so they're likely gonna be putting fundraising in there as well. So I'm gonna give them the slight edge on that one in this race. Going down to Miami, there's going to be actually a lot of competitive races here because all of these are relatively close. But also, it's more likely to be a bluer year, and there's also going to be a loss of support amongst some minority voters based on what we've seen, based on the. It's going to be the exact same thing as their races results here, pretty much. But now that we're seeing more losses for support, especially with the Trump campaign, with the administration, with minority voters based on polling recently, I think that this is definitely going to be a pushback here, and they will end up holding onto their seats. However, Luna is almost definitely going to hold on to her seat here in this area of Pinellas County. So there's basically probably going to be no change in the state of Florida. In Alabama, this seat that they were forced to redraw because this map was stated as illegal. Figures won by 9.2%. Again, this one's going to be another likely one. Very unlikely to actually flip or anything. To finish off the east of the Mississippi, we're going to go up to Ohio. This one is not affirmed, but most likely it's not going to be able to change. They have a very weird system to set their house districts, and they haven't actually changed this one yet, so they do not have any official house districts, but I'd be surprised if it changes. So here we can basically just pretend that this is the official one. So Sykes won by 2.2 points. That is likely to happen again. If you look at the map, they also won in 2022 when the popular vote was actually a bit more, 1 point more favorable to Democrats. And they weren't there originally because the map was even worse for Democrats. Here is a bit more competitive for them. Miller only by 15, that's why that's there. Turner by 18, that's under 20. And so in a very strong year like this, House districts are very, very movable, especially with the right candidates. So that's why you have to be a bit more careful with that. With those smaller sample sizes, they can move a lot more across the country. Captor by 0.63. That was after a 13-point win with not much of a national shift. This one looks really rough. If there's a seat that the Republicans can pick up, this one's almost definitely going to be it. It's going to be the first, the 9th district in, I think it was the 1st district. Nope, it was still the 9th. Okay. The 9th district in, yeah, I don't understand how they numbered these, honestly. Some of these are just not in order. So 9th, yeah, the 8th is right there, 9th is right there. So, okay. 9th district, Captor, I believe that just because of incumbency, if we see any strong candidates jump into that race, then definitely it's going to probably flip almost immediately. Landsman by almost 10. This is actually a left trending district, the area around Cleveland. Some of it was shoved into this district, but that's actually the more red outside area. This is going to be the inside of Cleveland. I think that's Cleveland. Columbus, Cincinnati. Yeah, I think I'm actually right on that one finally. Okay, so then we move on to Michigan. This is just because it was under 10, but that has continually gone blue for a while ever since it was drawn into existence in 2022. John James is leaving his seat to run for governor. He only won it by 0.49 in 2022, and it was a 2-point lead. The Republicans actually won by 1.3, and he won by 6.1. But if it ends up being something like 2018, Democrats have actually won this one before. It was a bit more gerrymandered as it does go into central Detroit. But I actually wouldn't be surprised if Democrats would be able to pick this one up. It completely depends on how the working class ends up reacting to more things that are going on with the Trump administration. We'll have to see a lot more polls on that. McDonald Rivet, this was a competitive seat that actually ended up being not so competitive, so they definitely have the advantage there, but not so much for Michigan's 7th, as this is actually a right trending district. If you look at the competition here, it was 3.6 to 9.1. This one actually moved 1.3 to the left, interestingly enough. But so that's really going to be a concern for the Democrats. This is going to be a difficult one for them to pick up. The Republicans are actually going to have the advantage there. Into Indiana, then we now have the only district that's going to be slightly competitive. This is actually a right trending district. It's continually slowly moving to the right, not by much though. So Democrats will be able to hold on to this one for a long time, most likely. Mervyn winning by a relatively comfortable 8.5 points. Going over to Illinois, we then end up with an 8.9 point win there. That's not going to be that competitive. And this was an interesting one, 8.4, but most likely that's still just going to end up being a strong Democratic win. Then finally, we end up with the 2 in Wisconsin. This one's going to be interesting. This one that I actually pointed out is going to be interesting because Stale only won by 10.2. I forget where he was from, though. Where did he end up going? I remember that name from somewhere. But maybe he has the exact same name as someone else. So Brian Stiles is going to most likely win re-election there. I think I actually completely I'm misremembering that or something. Or maybe I think that was actually one of the candidates in Florida. But anyway, only won by 10.2. He only won by 8.9 in 2022, and prior to that, 12.3 in 2018, and that was before his district was drawn a bit less favorably towards Democrats. So, interestingly enough, that's actually going to be only a likely for the Republicans. This is definitely going to be a sleeper flip. It's going to be actually no less than 80% chance. Probably going to be 3 and 4, but that is actually going to be a lean district there. And then you look at Van Orden. He's actually been under fire recently. He only won by 2.7 when Republicans actually won by 3. And if you look in 2018, Democrats won the vote here by 8. So if anything, he's probably going to go down this cycle. I wouldn't be surprised. He only flipped the seat in 2022 to begin with, but that was also because the district got redrawn. He won against Kind actually retired, so that was the only reason that he really got the seat in the first place. So with all of that, I think that actually does mean that the Democrats are likely to flip this seat. He's also come under fire for some controversial statements made online, so that might end up coming to hit him. We'll have to see. You go into Iowa, the 2nd district, 15.6. That's why it's likely, but I wouldn't expect it to flip like it did in 2018. And they also did redraw the map, so that's going to hurt things a bit. None only winning by 3.8. The popular vote was by 13, though. If you look at 2018, actually the Democrats won it in Iowa, which is interesting to think about. But most likely, none is going to be favored to win this one. But Miller Meeks performs very, very poorly. This is definitely going to be a tilt Democrat race here. Meeks performs poorly on most levels to begin with in the first place. Moving in here, 12. I have no idea why I didn't put that one in. I won by 11.8 in 2022. It's actually not that strong performance. Wagner by 6.4. Okay, and then 1. Okay, so I have no idea why I don't have that. I guess that would technically be likely, but that's really not that weak for performance. I'd expect that's going to go strongly for the Republicans. That's going to be a likely race there. That's going to be by 18. Moving into Texas, basically the entire thing is already set in stone. If they do redraw the maps to make it worse for Democrats, you look, it's actually not that bad, but then that would be very disappointing. There should be more competitive districts as well. But Gonzalez is relatively doing well. If it's going to be a bluer year, like even 2022, he won by 8.5. And the popular vote was interestingly better for the Democrats in 2024 for the House races. But Gonzalez is still likely favored to win in the very beginning here. Same thing with Quellar, I believe that's going to be. So both of those are going to likely win re-election. In New Mexico, looking at the race here, 4.2. It's not going to be that strong of a performance, but I would be surprised if he does much worse. Hopping over to Colorado, then we can start out with Herd by 5. This is a really somewhat poor performance. It got redrawn in Boebert flipped districts. So Herd actually did better than Lauren Boebert, but if you look back at 2018, this is a very left trending district, so that's definitely going to be some concern. The Democrats did 1% worse in the popular vote in 2024. So actually, if anything, I think he'd probably be favored just based off of statistics alone. They're left trending districts, especially some regions out over here. They're not as populated, though. As you can tell, this is the largest district in Colorado. Lauren Boebert is likely to win re-election in her seat just because she's a large name. And Evans here is actually not favored because he did narrowly flip that seat there against Caraveo. This is actually, I believe, a seat that quite a few people thought it would stay blue, but it did actually flip narrowly by just under 3/4 of a point. But if there's going to be at all a considerably more blue environment, that's almost definitely going to flip. If we look in the state of Nebraska, this is a huge one. Don Bacon's retiring, so that almost immediately puts it in the hands of Democrats. It's almost a free seat. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't even really compete there that much, and if Republicans almost drop it, just because that's such a left-trending seat in general. Don Bacon actually lost margins, even though Democrats did a percent worse in the popular vote in 2024. Bobbing over to Montana. This was a seat that was expected to be competitive, but then Zinke won by 7.7. In 2018, the state as a whole, Gianforte only won by 4.6. So that definitely does show, obviously, that the state of Montana can get somewhat blue at times. Then 2022, this was where a lot of the blue vote went by 34, but also got split in the second district. If you add that together, that's 41. So that would be still a 15-point margin. But then you go to 2024 and end up winning by 7.7. This is going to be a tilt Republican seat at the moment. Going down to Utah, this is a redrawn district, basically completely safe. And the reason that I highlighted this, actually, this one's actually lower than interesting. The only reason I highlighted this was because that was actually the district that did flip in Utah not long ago, the 4th district, by a 1/4 point. But then it flipped right back in 2020, and it has been nowhere close since. Going down to Arizona, quite a competitive state here. We have a retirement with Andy Biggs, so that's actually going to be a likely seat just because of it's Phoenix. It's moving towards the left. Stanton, likely to win re-election. It was just under 10. If you look at Siscomani, that's actually going to be a slightly risky seat for the Republicans have to hold on to. Only won by 1.5 in 2020. This was because the state was trending to the left. If you especially look at 2018, Kirkpatrick, O'Halloran, and all of these, it was actually basically 50-50 and just barely advantage for the Democrats. And they managed to hold on in 2020. Then they redrew the districts to be favorable to the Republicans. The question is, will they be able to flip some of these seats? So Arizona's 6th, 2.5-point margin there. It's actually 2.51. So then you end up looking at that's most likely going to be able to flip. That's not as strong of a region. It's moving a bit towards the right, but not as much as the rest of the state. The rest of the state moved 7 to the right, but it only moved 1.2. So the relatively weak candidate there might have been a strong opposition in Angle versus no, it was still Angle. So that was probably why the margin went up. So it's definitely just a weak candidate there. They need to pick someone else. Crane is definitely still going to be favored. This is a Republican chunk of the state, except for these reservations here, these 2 counties. I believe that's the 2nd largest county in the state, right? Placed like right around there. And then Schweikert is actually going to be slightly favored. That's the northern Phoenix area that's not moving to the left as hard as the rest of it is. Actually, Arizona's 8th, I think, is moving to the left faster. So then we move to Nevada, which is actually moving towards the right. Definitely did this cycle. I mean, looking at the vote here, 2022 to 2024, one of them actually went up. But the popular vote actually just completely shifted away, and a lot of people voted for independent, especially in the 2nd district here. But that's definitely going to be safe for the Republicans either way. Then you look down at these are basically going to be likely seats. Their incumbents is going to be a better year. So I think that basically is going to perfectly balance out the rightward trend in the state. And they end up going to Lee by 2.7. That's going to be a tilt race. That's going to be one that the Democrats are likely going to be fighting for. He actually won by less in 2024. Now, there was a huge tank in the Democratic vote there, but that was also because quite a bit of it went to third-party candidates. Moving over to California. This is good. This, as always, the state of California is going to make or break a House majority. And it made it for the Republicans, even though the Democrats actually gained 3 seats. They ended up falling short in the 41st and 22nd, and those two in and of itself would have been enough to get it to 218 to 217, which basically would have nullified any majority. But so now we end up looking here in the 18th district. That's basically going to be likely. That was just under 20 there. That's 12 and a half. That's going to be likely as well. We look up the coast here. These aren't necessarily going to be competitive. They're never really contested that well. Here, this was a very, very narrow seat. Tran only won by 0.21. I believe this was the closest race the entire cycle. California's 13th, right? The 13th, and then was actually the 45th. Interestingly enough, those were the two closest races, but that's most likely going to go tilt towards the Democrats, which means that they are now at 216, knocking on the door of a majority. You end up looking at Kim. That's going to be a likely race, but if there's anything that's going to be potentially flipping, it's going to be that based off of the other things that have been happening in LA, how they advertise that could definitely either end up going much stronger or much less strong. I don't know much about the demographics of that region. And then we finally end up going to the 41st district, Calvert's district. This flipped in 2022 after the redraws here. Nice shift. And so that's going to really come down to how well the Democrats can manage to do in some of these other regions, especially San Bernardino County right here flipped, and also I don't think that's Riverside, but one of those two also flipped. So if they end up managing to do relatively well there, then they will definitely be able to flip that one. They're slightly favored there because of the national environment. It's expected to move more than 3.4 to the left, but then again, there's a slight rightward trend in California. So which one will end up being stronger? There's definitely a lot of questions. So then we end up with white sides in the 27th district, winning by 2.7. Definitely favored here, which means that Democrats will take a House majority, which is generally to be expected at this point in time. The 20th district, this one's probably going to just end up being two Republicans again, or if anything, it's not going to be that competitive. The 3rd district's interesting. It's actually a very left-trending district, right along the Nevada border. It actually moved a bit to the right, but it was by 7.3 and then 10.9. That's actually not that much of a rightward trend, so I didn't need to click that 3 times. So it's only going to be a likely district, though, but just narrowly, it's going to be pretty close to a flat 80% chance of victory. It definitely could end up coming closer if they end up having a strong candidate. Harder is definitely going to end up winning re-election here. That's basically a likely seat that's right around the southern part of the capital, Sacramento, and that's also going to be the outer regions around San Francisco and such. The large suburban areas over here that are continually turning towards Democrats. Gray is just barely favored. I mean, barely won in a poor environment anyway. Flipping that seat in the first place was actually relatively good for the Democrats there. I mean, considering the fact that, it was first time in that district anyways, lost in 2022, flipping it, but then actually had a rematch and won. So the fact that you ended up doing a rematch and actually coming out on top that time is interesting. In the 21st district, Costa is expected to win there, 5.1, expected to be by a bit more. Valadeo continually somewhat overperforms 3 points in 2022, expected to do relatively well. Again, that's going to be a lean district for the Republicans. Going into the district in Oregon, it did flip in 2024. 2.7 points. That's going to be a tilt district for the Democrats. Coming in here, bringing their total up to 222, which is... I closed at some point. Which is already more than the Republicans had won this past cycle. And finally going up, second to last is going to be Washington. This one actually looks competitive, but it's not really. It's only because there were two Republicans battling it out. Back the last time it was a Democrat, it was by 35, 33. And then even in 2018, it was actually the reddest in the entire state. So it's actually not that competitive. It's just between those two Republicans. Schreier, 8.2 points, likely to win re-election this time, probably by double digits if I had to guess. Randall by 13.6. That's almost safe. Clallam County is actually left trending. That was the last That was the final bellwether county in the entire country to predict the presidential winner, and it went for Harris. So that was the final one that was left. And then finally, Perez in that is the 3rd district, slightly favored here to win re-election. Narrowly won by 0.82, and then ended up winning by 4 in 2024 in a less favorable environment, even in the state. Not by much, but by a slightly less favorable environment. And so then finally, we have one seat left, and that is the state of Alaska. Now, this one would be generally more competitive than usual, but Mary Peltola is signaling that she is not going to run for the House race. She almost won by 10 against Sarah Palin in 2022. I believe that's Sarah that ran. Yes. Okay. So, but and actually Nick Bigich actually did run, but then actually ended up beating her. The question is now, are there any other good candidates? Because if not, Bigich is actually expected to win re-election here, as there's not going to be any strong candidate. She's likely to run for governor, which would definitely make things a bit more competitive there. But that means that Democrats are expected to currently have a 15-seat majority here, a relatively strong majority, which, I mean, there definitely has been larger ones. I mean, but 222 to 213 was what it was in 2020. So that would be a larger than the 2021, but definitely smaller than the 35-seat majority that they had in 2018. So it's going to be somewhere between those two due to redrawing maps, lower elasticity across the board, poorer candidates in some regions, and regional trends. Thank you all so much for watching today's video. And so now I'm going to be getting over to Australia before the election happens. After my week-long break, I'll be back on Tuesday the 15th, a week from today. And so then I'll be coming out with a video on the 16th. So thank you all so much for watching, and have a fantastic rest of your day.